initiative, and then we'll have time for some questions. So PRTR as a community right to know tool. Some of you might know that in 1984, there was an industrial accident in Bhopal, India. The Union Carbide chemical plant accidentally released very toxic methyl isocyanate gas. And at the time, about 500,000 people were exposed, and approximately 20,000 deaths since then have been attributed to that accident, with thousands of people also disabled. So with that, actually, Union Carbide succeeded in avoiding a great deal of the responsibility for the event. After that event, there were others, including one in West Virginia, also a Union Carbide plant. There was a release of a mixture of chemicals used to produce pesticides. Nobody died in that event, and there have been other industrial accidents, so that in 1986, the United States decided to establish the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, also known as EPCRA. And that act supports public access to information on the use and release of toxic chemicals in communities. So it also, very importantly, established the Toxics Release Inventory, which was the first PRTR program. Then skipping ahead, in 1993, Canada established its own PRTR, the National Pollutant Release Inventory. And then in 1994, the CEC was established. And for a few years, top priorities were chemicals management and PRTR. One of the first council resolutions recognized that awareness of chemical risks is a prerequisite for chemical safety. And a report called Putting the Pieces Together on the status that looked at the status of PRTRs in North America was prepared. And then in 2006, through work and collaboration with the US and Canadian programs, Mexico established its mandatory PRTR, the Registro de Emisiones y Transferencia de Contaminantes. So just to look at PRTR around the world, this map shows the status of PRTRs in the world. In 1992, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, established its PRTR working group, and the CEC is part of that group. And that was based on the call under Agenda 21 to countries to improve their chemical databases. So the OECD's PRTR work group supports developing efforts of its member countries. In 2003, the Kiev Protocol on PRTRs was established, and that meant that in 2009, it's a legally binding instrument, so that the countries that ratified the protocol had in 2009 to be at least developing their own PRTR. So as a result, today, there are approximately 40 PRTRs around the world and another 10 or so that are pilot projects. So the green on this map shows the active PRTRs. The light blue shows PRTR activities that have been initiated or are in the pilot phase. And then the dark blue shows areas where there is interest in PRTR. And a number of times, the OECD has hailed the North American PRTR initiative as a model of regional cooperation. So turning to the overview of the North American PRTR initiative, basically what we do is we bring together data from the three countries, Canada's NPRI, Mexico's RETSE, and the United States TRI. So the objectives and activities of the initiative are, first and foremost, to promote or to improve access to comparable North American PRTR data and information. And so we do that through the Taking Stock Online website. You can see a picture of that, the light blue there, the Taking Stock symbol, which has also our integrated North American PRTR database. And we also provide data presentations and additional analyses in our Taking Stock report series. At the top right there, you see 2 examples of Taking Stock reports that have been published over time. The second objective is to promote data comparability, completeness, and consistency. As some of you may know, each PRTR program has its own list of substances, industrial sectors, and activities that are subject to reporting. They have, in some cases, the reporting thresholds vary, and so on. There was a little bit of that in the background document that was circulated prior to this event. So we work very closely with the 3 programs to harmonize the data so that they can be integrated into the Taking Stock online database. And we also work to promote more complete and comparable data and reporting across the region. As part of that, we've got the action plan to enhance the comparability of PRTRs in North America. Just below the image of the Taking Stock reports is another document there, and that's the action plan. The action plan was updated in 2014 through a workshop over a couple of days that involved people from all sectors of society. Some of you might have been involved in that effort. And so the action plan serves as a sort of roadmap for our regional PRTR work. The third objective is to engage stakeholders from all sectors, industry, governments, non-governmental organizations, citizens, academia, in discussions about industrial pollutants through activities such as the one today, as well as our in-person meeting, which is open to everybody. But also we do involve industry experts, subject matter experts, researchers, NGOs, to review the data that we analyze for our Taking Stock reports. And finally, last but not least, a key objective is to promote the use of PRTR data to support pollution prevention and sustainability. One example of that, you see there a little box that says Industry P2 Challenge. So we have embarked on an industry pollution prevention challenge, and I'll talk very briefly about that in a few minutes. So turning to Taking Stock Online, which is our database and website. I'll talk only briefly about that because there's going to be a demonstration, as Orlando mentioned. So just to say that for the homepage, and you see a view of that here in the top right, we've added additional contextual information, interactive graphics, and data overviews to help users better access and understand the data. The data in our integrated North American database are from 2006 to 2020, and we should probably by the end of this year be able to incorporate 2021 data and possibly 2022 for the 3 countries. So currently we have actually over 40,000 facilities represented for that time period across the region. The database covers pollutant releases and transfers. And that means that on site, facilities can report their releases to air, water, and land, as well as their on-site disposals. And off-site, facilities can transfer pollutants to disposal, to recycling, as well as to further management, for instance, treatment. And our database also includes a cross-border transfers tool, so you can view the data by source and recipient facility. And soon we expect to be able to incorporate facility-level greenhouse gas data, which would complete, the profile for air releases from certain facilities. So another key activity that we have is the Taking Stock report. Just in March of this year, we published the 16th edition of the Taking Stock report. And that report had a feature analysis of transfers to disposal. So those are disposals sent off the site, off the facility's site for disposal. The objective of this analysis was to enhance the understanding of industrial waste disposal practices, the associated risks, as well as the alternatives to waste generation and disposal. To the right there, you see two graphics, one showing total transfers to disposal reported across North America and for each country for the 2014 to 2018 period, a 5-year period, which was when the most recently available data for the 3 countries when we began writing the report. And then the graphic underneath that shows the offsite transfers to disposal by category that were reported for that period. We looked at 6 categories. That includes landfills and surface impoundments, underground injection, stabilization or treatment prior to disposal. We looked at land application, storage prior to disposal, and then a category that's called other disposal, which is where the process is not defined. So the key findings of this analysis are that offsite disposals, which we've abbreviated as OSD here, approximately 11,000 facilities reported approximately 335 million kilograms per year of offsite disposals. Landfills and surface impoundments accounted for about 50% of the total, but there was a decrease of about 15% over the 5-year period. And then meanwhile, there were increases in a couple of other categories, a 30% increase in stabilization or treatment prior to disposal, and a 40% increase in transfers to land application, which is the application of pollutants on soil, sometimes being mixed in. And then geographically, we see that offsite disposals for Canada and the United States, they represented about 6% of total releases and transfers. So everything reported by facilities, all types of releases and transfers. Whereas in Mexico, offsite disposals represented about 12% in 2014, and they increased to 34% of the total in 2018. And a key driver of that increase was the gold and silver mining sector. Finally, across North America, we see that over 2/3 of total offsite disposals can be attributed to approximately 10 industry sectors. Some of them are steel mills, oil and gas extraction facilities, electric utilities. And they can also be attributed to approximately 10 pollutants or pollutant groups. So if a pollutant and its compounds, for instance. Some examples of that are zinc, manganese, lead, and barium compounds, as well as hydrogen sulfide. So what have we learned from this analysis? Well, we've learned that there are some important data and information gaps that are due to differences among the 3 PRTRs in terminology and definitions for offsite disposal. One example is that landfills in Mexico are for domestic waste or special waste, such as construction waste, but not for PRTR pollutants. There are differences also among the reporting requirements, particularly when we're looking at what we call top sectors, pollutants, or disposal practices. And when we say top, we just mean that those sectors, pollutants, or practices were among the most frequently reported and accounted for the largest amounts or proportions of the total. So, for instance, we have a difference. Oil and gas extraction activities are not subject to reporting in the United States, except for a small segment, which are natural gas processing plants. And certain pollutants, for instance, barium compounds, are not subject to reporting in all 3 countries. So we see, data and information gaps due to those differences. There are also gaps that can be attributed to the shared responsibility for the enforcement and the monitoring of waste disposal. So, for instance, you can have standards and regulations developed for underground injection activities, but then the management, the day-to-day management of those activities are at the subnational level, for instance, states and provinces. And then finally, we see that the involvement of third parties, for instance, waste management facilities, we see that there are gaps created by that because those are sort of second or, well, third party facilities that aren't included in the PRTR reports. And we also see gaps due to incomplete data for recipient facilities, especially when they cross national borders. So the CBT stands for cross-border transfers. So these gaps impede our ability to track and manage transfers to disposal. And they also impede our ability to respond to extreme events, for instance, floods that can remobilize pollutants from disposal sites. As I mentioned before, we also see that a small number of sectors and pollutants account for over 2/3 of total offsite disposal. So that means that pollution prevention policies and programs can use the data, the PRTR data, to target specific sectors and pollutants. And finally, we see through different sources and information that's included in the Taking Stock report that facilities are implementing pollution prevention as well as green chemistry, which means substituting maybe very toxic pollutants for less toxic alternatives. So all that to say that PRTRs can serve as important tools to track progress in industry, as well as to support best practices for avoiding the generation and disposal of waste. And now just briefly, as I mentioned earlier, we have embarked this year on an industry pollution prevention challenge. The idea there is to promote sustainability and green chemistry in the automotive manufacturing sector and supply chain. That's a sector that's been of interest to the 3 PRTR programs, and there's already activities taking place in the sector. And so we thought that taking an approach, taking a view from the point of view of PRTR data, that we could complement existing activities. This challenge came out of the action plan to enhance the comparability of PRTRs. There was a suggestion there to involve industry in promoting pollution prevention. So as I said, right now we're in the first phase, and that's looking at the pollution prevention data for the sector and its supply chain to assess the information to see what gaps exist across the region, as well as what the issues are, including if they relate to existing PRTR reporting requirements. The next phases are going to be determined based on what we learn in this first phase. But the idea would be to engage the industry to share information on pollution prevention best practices, barriers, and solutions, as well as to implement best practices across the sector, the supply chain, and as well as the region. Finally, we have also just embarked on a pilot project in collaboration with the OECD as well as the 3 PRTRs of North America. And that's to use PRTR data to track cross-border transfers. So in Taking Stock Online, even though we focus on North America, facilities in Canada, Mexico, and the United States can report their transfers to any country. This map here shows what some of the data look like. So the idea for this is to use the cross-border transfers data in Taking Stock Online, as well as other information, to conduct a case study that would assess the accuracy and completeness of that reporting, as well as possible enhancements to existing PRTR reporting requirements. So with that, I'll leave it there. I don't know if you have questions, whether for the CEC or any of the PRTR representatives that are here with us. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Danielle. Yeah, we have a question in the chat. The person, Fernando Diaz Barriga, has a question. It says, have you used the information to compare emissions among similar sectors in different countries in order to assess their behavior?
Yes, in fact, if you take a look at the taking stock reports, not just the latest one, but a number of them, we actually do look at sectors. For instance, we've had a report looking at the pulp and paper releases and transfers reported by the North American pulp, paper and paperboard manufacturing sector. We've looked at the oil and gas sector. Gee, a number, but we have some reports that look specifically at sectors. And what we do is we look at reporting in the three countries and how that reporting compares. We look at the pollutants that are reported, which activities can be attributed to which types of releases and transfers and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Danielle. We have other questions in the chat as well. Here there is another one. It says, how comprehensive is the PRTR monitoring is as a share of all pollutants of these types in the US, Canada, and Mexico? If you presumably cover the largest, most emitting facilities, do you have a sense of whether the adds up to 90% of all emissions you're trying to measure, or 50 or 25?
Oh, I apologize. There was something wrong with my my microphone, I think, or not my microphone, my headset, and I didn't hear. Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, we could open the microphone for the person who was asking this question. We unfortunately we don't have the name, but if the person who was trying to write down this question could just open, yeah.
Yeah, it's me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I was just wondering, how comprehensive is do you think the data that you have is like, I guess it's a question about coverage. So do you have a sense of whether, and you were talking about gaps, so that kind of was starting to address this, but like what share of all pollutants of these types that you're trying to measure do you think you actually have data for? Is it like, if you could put a rough estimate on it, is it like 90%, 50%, 25%? Like what percentage of what you're trying to measure do you think you're actually getting, if that makes sense?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm the best person to respond to that, given that there are differences among the three programs. I know that sector coverage is an effort that the three programs make, to be sure that the industrial sectors are well represented in terms of the pollutants. Pollutants are included in PRTRs based on assessments, of like, for instance, the chemicals management plan in Canada, through assessments, pollutant assessments. If a pollutant is considered to be important in terms of its inherent toxicity and a whole other number of factors, it gets included in the PRTR. But I don't know if perhaps any of the PRTR representatives here would like to respond to that.
Hi, this is Tristan. I hope you can all hear me. I'll take that.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I suppose I don't have the answer offhand, but I think it'd be worth looking into the different types of pollutants that we have across the different inventories. So for example, we have a lot of data on criteria air contaminants, but we also have the air pollution emissions inventory, the API, that does an estimate of all of those CACs being released across Canada. And depending on the substance, it often, the coverage of the MPRI compared to all estimated releases from Canada vary quite a bit. So if we look at nitrogen oxides, the proportion that's released, that's calculated by the MPRI, is much lower because there's quite a few that's released from the transportation industry, which is included in the PRTR. While compared to, say, looking at sulfur dioxides, then the proportion for the MPRI is much greater, perhaps something closer to like 60 to 70%. So definitely, I think it varies quite a lot by substance, by industry type. So it'd be worth looking at the different data sets. But yeah, sometimes there's quite a bit of coverage from the MPRI. Otherwise, it can drop a fair amount because the release is coming from other sectors that aren't looked at by the NPRI.
That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for this feedback regarding this question. Orlando, do you want to add something?
Yes, just adding to what Tristan mentioned. First, we have to take into account that in this under this initiative, we're looking at what they call point sources or stationary sources. It does not include emissions from other sources, mobile sources, on-road sources, off-road sources, and other small-scale activities like area sources. Also, the coverage is in what we're doing with the North American PRTR initiative. It focuses on the toxics releases that are reported by facilities. It does not include criteria air contaminants, which are covered under the NPRI, for example. Greenhouse gases are covered under the Mexican PRTR, but not covered under the NPRI and the TRI. However, now the US and Canada have greenhouse gases reporting programs in place. So what we're trying to do is also we are going to be bringing that information in so we can account then for the different types of for let's say for other types of pollutants that are emitted by the PRTR facilities that report. So it is it will be different for each country in terms of the coverage, but if you are talking about point sources only or stationary sources, industrial sources, I remember we did some analysis a couple of years ago, and let's say in the case of the US, when you compare what is reported or the number of facilities reporting under the TRI program, about 70% of the TRI facilities also report to the national emissions inventory of the US that has specifically data on criteria air contaminants. So there are different instruments to get that information. So the countries try to do the best they can in terms of the coverage, covering at least 90% or more of all the emissions, but they are covered under different programs. And I think that's the challenge, to get that information into one place.
That makes total sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Orlando. Thank you, everyone. Perhaps we would like just to address a question that Thomas has. He would like to have a clarification on what is the source of information that fits the PRTR, and if there is any verification mechanism in relation to what is reported by the industry.
Sure. Well, I'll take a stab at that. I think that, well, first and foremost, the source of information is the publicly available information from the 3 PRTRs themselves. So each has online information, and you can look for data by facility and so on. So we encourage you to discover those national PRTR programs. And what was the other part of the question?
The verification.
It says, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Verification mechanism.
Right. And so, yes, each program also has its data quality, data, assurance procedures, and, if for instance, there are big discrepancies from year to year in reporting by facilities, that gets looked into. That's just one example of how they might verify that the data are accurate and are reported. Also, we participate in that process. We can raise issues when we're incorporating the data into taking stock online. If we see anything, we can flag that as well. So there's a few sets of eyes looking at the data. I don't know if anyone from the PRTR programs would like to add anything.
I believe Anne Monette from the MPRI wrote a message regarding this question.
Sorry, no, it was for the previous question about sector coverage. I shared a link, but I can't figure out how to send it to everybody in the chat. So maybe somebody on your end could send it to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you. We will try to write down that in the chat for everybody's attention on this comment.
If I may know that whether or not any of the other PRTR officials may want to address the question about the process for data verification.
I could perhaps speak briefly about what we do. So as Danielle mentioned, facilities must report this data to our programs, and they have different calculation methods to estimate their releases, whether it's direct monitoring or calculations. And then we conduct extensive quality control of the data. So again, looking at trends, contacting facilities, having sector experts and associations look at the data as well, so that when we finally publish that data a few months down the line, we've made as many corrections as possible, and then it's as clean as possible.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sandra. I was going to talk.
Well, I could leave it to you, Belu, as the data quality experts and running our program for the USTRI.
Okay. For TRI, my name is Belu Senthil. I do spend a lot of time on TRI data quality. So as Daniela mentioned, just we do quite a bit of work on TRI data quality. So we compare, for example, so several things we do. Just I will mention few of things. So we will compare what they reported for this year versus last year and so on. So we just, if we notice any discrepancy, we'll flag them and reach out to those facilities. And the same, just also we pay a little bit closer attention to types of chemicals, which chemicals we are talking about. Is it PBT or PFAS and so on. So, and also medium of release, is it air release, water release, and so on. So we just combine all those things, develop a list of facilities. We also compare TRI data with other programs, for example, the National Emissions Inventory, and so on. So like a RECRA, the RECRA data set. So we compare the data, TRI data with other programs, what facilities reported to other programs, and what is missing in TRI, and so on. So we reach out to those facilities. So we normally do like a twice a year, one for national analysis, and the other one usually runs from July through September. The other ones we call ad hoc data quality checks, usually runs from February through end of April or even May. So we just roughly every year we probably can't reach out to almost maybe around 2,000 facilities per se every year. That's in both cycles. I mean, that's just a rough, just to give a brief overview. But if you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and just I can walk you through any steps you may be interested in, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. for this complement to the question. Just one more question before we go to the next presentation. Jack Johnson says, in your transfer disposal data, does it show by each facility which disposal site they send it to? It will be useful to have that data to be able to show the releases from the disposal site to show to extent to which is a transfer of pollution or to another community. Just a comment from Jack Johnson. Excuse me, from John Jackson.
Yeah, hi, John. Nice to have you with us. Yes, well, I think that right at the moment in Taking Stock Online, we have that information for cross-border transfers. So that's for transfers to disposal that are sent across national borders. And we're looking to try to incorporate information on the recipient facilities for transfers within the country, which is a very big task. And so at this time, it requires a lot of data validation. So we're not there yet. I see that Alicia has her hand up. So I don't know, Alicia, did you want to make a comment or a question?
Hi, Danielle. Thanks. Hi, John. It's Alicia here. I just wanted to follow up that I am also taking a bit of a deep dive into that topic. And so it's definitely on the radar here in Canada. And we'll have some interesting maps to share with both the CEC and the public in the coming months.
And Danielle, I can also mention from the US TRI side that we currently, within our toxics tracker tool, have the ability to search by the sending facility as well as the receiving facility. So folks are definitely able to access what is being sent domestically as well as internationally. Although, as Danielle was alluding to, there are some comparability issues or difficulties in terms of trying to aggregate. So this question of looking at our data from a receiving end is not necessarily as straightforward as we think because of maybe inconsistencies in how different facilities are reporting the identification information for those receiving facilities. And so we do have a great deal of work to do as a continent, and so we are working on that collaboratively to try to address, how best to identify these facilities and move forward with our future reporting and visualization as well.
Thank you, everyone, for chatting.
If I can just say thank you to all of you for the responses. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so to continue with our agenda for today, Orlando, I will give you the floor for our demo of the Taking Stock Online.
All right. Thank you very much, Natalia, and thank you, everybody, for your questions. And at the end of this demo, we also have another opportunity to exchange views and address any questions regarding the demo or regarding our previous conversation. Before I go on, also, I would like to remind people there are some of the participants that have they have not identified themselves in their on the in Zoom. If you could please type your name, that will be appreciated. When we have all these questions and all that, again, we will be answering them if we can during this conversation. Otherwise, we will reply by email. We will share the information with all the registered participants, so you may receive the email. So we want to make sure that we have the right information so we can follow up on this conversation. So now I'm going to move then to a demo or demonstration on the Taking Stock Online database. Can everybody see the website? Okay, great. And you can access it through the CEC website, www.cec.org, and then /taking stock. That will be in English, en balance in Spanish, and alors de compte in French. We made some changes to the website based on the feedback we have received from many of you. And the demo is also going to be based on the feedback we received during the pre-event survey. So we're going to be addressing some of the issues that people raised during the pre-event survey. So you'll see that here, but we can be here the whole day playing around with the data. So this is the landing page of our Taking Stock database. Again, this is the integrated North American PRTR database. We bring together the information from the TRI, the MPRI, and the REDSE programs from Canada, US, and Mexico. We focus on the toxics data. It does not include criteria contaminants, nor the greenhouse gases. And that's something we're working on right now. So on the landing page, we have made a couple changes. Basically, well, just adding context to the information. Is not only data, or let's say data is not information. So we need to make sure that when people look at numbers, look at the information, they can put it into context. So we start with a kind of an overview of what the taking stock is, our relationship also with the pollution that is reported. Basically, all our activities, whether it's consuming products from electronics, producing energy, to consuming food, may end up resulting in pollutants released into the environment that needs to be managed. And that's why we need access to this information in order to have the data accessible to all sectors of society so we can work together in pollution prevention and reduction efforts. So what we added here on the new landing page is the data overview. We start with a pictorial representation of the PRTR. As Daniel mentioned at the beginning, you have, let's say, a facility that reports releases to air, to water, underground injection, to land, disposal, and then you have the transfers. Could be to recycling, to disposal, or for further management. And this page is intended to give an overview of the data at the North American level and also at the national level without going into the main database to do a query. So on this one, you can select the type of release that you're interested in with air, like it is here. You can, if I click on water, then you can see that the graph changes again. And we can see here that for 2020, the year 2020, the top pollutants, again, the reported pollutants in the largest frequency or amounts are listed here at the North American level. You can do it, look at it at the North American level, and you can look at it again at the national level. And as you can see, as you change the type of pollutant and the amounts change as well. Also, in terms of the pollutants, you can look at specific types of pollutants, whether it is, developmental or reproductive toxicants, carcinogens, metals, persistent, bioaccumulative toxic pollutants. And that's of interest to a number of people. So you will notice also that we added information about the criteria for selecting this graph or developing or deriving the graph. We're talking about releases to air for North America, all pollutant types, and then how many facilities are included in this total, and how many pollutants are also included in the overall totals. Also, you have all related information to the pollutants in this case, which is, for example, the PRTR reporting requirements for those pollutants. And here we talk about, what the pollutant coverage in each of the programs. And then we have links to additional data and information on that. Also, factors to consider when using PRTR data to evaluate risk. Again, we want to make sure that people know that an amount of a pollutant is not necessarily an indicator of a direct indicator of risk, meaning when people ask, is 500 kilograms of arsenic, will that affect my health? Well, that will depend on whether it's emitted to air, to water, to land, the exposure level as well. So there are many factors. So we want people to have this information as well. Also, very important, the toxicity equivalency potential. Not all pollutants are the same. They don't have the same impact. For example, it's not the same 100 tons of ammonia to air than 100 tons of mercury to air or to water. So the impact will be different. And we will be talking about this a little bit later. If you select also, let's say by industry, same concept, then this will provide you information about the top industries that reported across North America. And then here you have additional information on the industrial sectors itself. For example, the North American Industry Classification System, that's the one that we use for our Taking Stock online database. And also PRTR reporting requirements relative to industry sectors. What is the coverage of the different sectors in each of the countries? So this is all important background information that is very useful when trying to look at the information, look at what is reported, and making sense of it. And of course, here you can change the year as well. Let's say, we'll go to 2020, 2019, 2018, and you can see how the information has changed. And here, of course, if you click on, let's say, this particular graph, then it will take you to the query that the system used to bring that data together. So you have here an industry query, you have a map with the facilities that were included, you have a list of the facilities that are included in that query that resulted in the graph, and then a breakdown by state, province, territory, the industry, that's the one that we selected, the types of pollutants, and then breakdown by individual pollutants. So we're going to, if I can do this, go back. To the Taking Stock online. So this is just the landing page. And of course, then we have our cross-border transfer tool that allows you again, to provide and to get an overview of the cross-border transfers. Here you can change the year, and you can see how the amounts change. Also, if you go down, this is the access point to the query tool of our database. Again, also an entry point to the cross-border transfers tool, and also to our mapping tool, which is basically you can look at the facilities in departing from a map and a location. So you can go directly and then go into specific facilities that are in your area. And of course, the map can be changed. You can zoom in and you can look at the facility in the context of not only of what they report, but in the context of where they are located. Are they located next to a water body? Are they located next to a community? Are they located next to a vulnerable population or a natural reserve? So all that helps analyze the information in different contexts. Also, this is an entry point to the taking stock report. As Daniel mentioned, we just published our 16th edition of the report. And of course, you can contact us for any questions you may have about the program, about the data, and any feedback that you may have that will help us improve these tools and provide better access to the information. So now let's go into some examples of the queries. But actually, sorry, before that, if you go also to the top of the page, you will see you can give us some feedback. Again, we have the survey, which is still on. If you did not have the chance to complete the survey prior to the event, please do so. We have information on the action plan to increase the comparability of PRTRs in North America, links to the report again, additional information about using and understanding taking stock and the taking stock report and the database. And then again, the different tools, the query tool, the explore cross-border transfers, and the map data tool. So let's go quickly then to the query tool. Here is if you have a specific need to access facility level data and do analysis, export the information and all that, this is the place where you will do that. There are basically two simple steps. Basically, first, selecting the report type. There are 7 report types, and then applying filters to refine that query. And the first query that we're going to do, again, it relates to the feedback that we received during the survey. There's a person that was interested in knowing more about the possible impacts of pollutants released to the environment, as well as releases to water. So we will, in this query, we will combine both. So we're going to select a report by pollutant, and then we will group the results by country. Otherwise, you'll have the pollutant in the 3 countries. So this is to facilitate the interpretation. And then for the years, the default is all years. We have data dating back to 2006, but for ease of use, we are going to select the latest available year in taking stock, the 2020. All countries, you can do all countries, you can do one country at a time as you wish. Again, you can select state, province, territories, watersheds. And then let's say you're interested in persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic pollutants, which are very important or of concern when we deal with water issues. And then the release and transfer type. In this case, the default is total releases and transfers, but we're going to deselect that and then select on-site surface water discharges. Okay, and just very quickly, if you see also these different information icons throughout the tool, it gives you additional information about, the pollutants, what they are, how they're classified, etc., and how they are classified. Especially here when we talk about the pollutant types. All right, and let me see. Yeah, and so we'll go and submit. And in this case, then you'll have the results page right away. First, you have information about your query. This is a summary of the query that you just did. You can make changes to it as well and refine your query as you go along. Then it will show you here the different pollutants. You can have 85 different pollutants released to water. And you have the pollutant, the cast number, the country, and then the amount. We selected also kilograms. You can select your unit of measure. You can also sort the table by pollutant, by country, by amount, by just clicking here. And then you can add other information that could be other types of releases that you can select and put in the table. Since we were talking about releases to water and pollutant impacts, we will select the TEP score, the toxicity equivalency potential. And we added that to our table. And the toxicity equivalency potential is a way of looking at the, say, risk posed by, or the potential risk of a specific pollutant, as it may be carcinogen or toxic but non-carcinogen. There are two pollutants that are used as reference. Benzene is used as a reference for cancer effects, and toluene is used as a reference for non-cancer effects. And these are available not for all pollutants, just a select group of pollutants, and only to air and water, not to land or underground injection or other types of releases. And just as an example, we have here, 1,1-dichloroethane. Here you have the information about this particular pollutant. It seems to be reportable only in the US. Here you have a pollutant that is reportable to the 3 countries, and you have information on the different reporting thresholds for each of the programs. Also, if you look here, you have information about that pollutant and the different types of releases that have been reported for it for that year. Now, back to the toxicity equivalency potential, as I was mentioning before, if you have no two pollutants are the same, so and the amounts are not the only indicator of a potential risk. And for example, we have like right here, 1,1 dichloroethane. You have 453 kilograms that were reported as discharges to surface waters. And that will be, for a non-cancer risk, that will be the equivalent, you can say, of 1,814 kilograms of toluene if you release it to the water. So that gives you an indication of the toxicity of the pollutant in question. So you can also export this table and other fields that you may choose in Excel format, tab delimited, or comma delimited. So that's it for this query. And now we're going to go to another one, which there is interest in knowing about pollutant releases and transfers from the oil and gas exploration sector, and also about pollutant releases near indigenous communities. So we have combined, we have worked on a query to combine these aspects. One thing that we need to clarify about this sector, oil and gas exploration is not reportable under the activities and reportable under the PRTR programs. Oil and gas extraction is. And with all that, there are differences in coverage amongst the three countries. So we want to clarify that. Right here, you can actually, instead of going back to the main query page, you can change the report type right here and do a facility query. And then year 2020, all countries, you can say all pollutants. And then industry sector, we can select oil and gas. Oil and gas extraction. This is based on the 2111 NICS code. So when you apply, you do a facility query, you immediately get a map of the facilities. The ones mapped here are the ones that are shown on this table, just the first 10 records. If you extend, we have 207 records. If you extend that, you see that your facility or your map will change. And you'll see the facilities in the different countries. Now you have a listing of facilities. And let's take this one, for example, it's a Canadian National Upgrading. It's a Canadian facility in Alberta. And you have the facility name, you have the industry sector, you have the type of pollutants. There is discharges. Here is discharge. Well, we have the discharges to water. That means other. If we go to, we can change that. include other total releases and transfers. Okay. Here too. Good. Yeah, you can see the total releases and transfer from the sector. And we'll have to do this because we don't do it in the query. But you can again select waste to air, to land, to water. And since this facility did not report any on-site water discharges. Okay, and then again the pollutant type. Okay, and again when we talk about facility level, you can export not only in Excel, but you can also have KML and KMZ files for viewing it using mapping applications like Google Maps or Google Earth. And let's say if we go to the facility here, and this is again where the question was about, do you have information about facilities in my community, in an indigenous community or the community where you live? You can use the mapping application again to look at the location of this facility. And you can zoom in. You see the facility information, and then you can look at it and see what's around, whether this is your community or not, or what other locations of interest are nearby. All right, and so that's that is for the facility and pollutant queries. I'm going to then finish very quickly so we can have time for additional discussion on the cross-border transfers tool. Here you can again look at information that is reported as being transferred from one country to the facility in one country to a facility in another country. And let's say we want to look at transfers from the US to Mexico. Let's put it that way. So you select your country of your source country, and then again we'll select 2020. You can select multiple years, but it's easier to visualize the information for 1 year. All industry sector, all transfer types, and then again the transfers can be recycling, could be disposal, could be treatment, regeneration as well. So you submit, and then you will have again your query summary here, and then the breakdown by country. These are the countries to which TRI facilities in the US have reported as sending to other countries. So from Argentina, let's see, like 20 different countries. And let's go to Mexico. So we have, these are then the facilities that received those transfers from the US in Mexico. And here you have the recipient facility, where it's located, the amount transfer, and here you can also select, the type of transfer. I should say that many of the transfers are destined to recycling. as we can see in the data. And then a breakdown by state, and then by source and recipient facility. So ABB industrial connections in Maine in the US send 429,811 kilograms of transfers of copper to this facility in Nuevo León. That's most likely for recycling. And again, breakdown by industry. And then breakdown by pollutant type. And then again, by different pollutants that are being transferred. And this concludes the demo at this point. If you have any questions, you're most welcome to post them. We can talk about the information, and if we have time, we can also dig into some of these queries. I hope this information is useful. This is just a start, since there are many ways of looking at the information, and you can look at the information using Taking Stock Online. You can look at the information using the MPRI system or the TRI or the Red in Mexico, and then use our tools to analyze it. There are some tools that we have that those programs do not have. Also, it is very good to look at the data in the context of, let's say, borders, for facilities on both sides of the border. Also looking at, industries from the three countries, as Dr. Diaz-Barriga asked at the beginning, to do comparisons. What is this sector emitting, let's say in Canada, the US, and Mexico, and you can have everything right there on one shot. So thank you for your attention, and we'll open it now for any questions, or then we'll go into our open discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Orlando. This presentation was very important to complement our knowledge regarding the PRTR initiative. We do have a couple of questions in the chat before we hand it over Danielle to have this open discussion among the participants. So Madison asks, she was wondering if there is a way to programmatically access the Taking Stock database, like through an API or with code?
Right now, we have not developed an API. This is something that we have discussed. So that's something that is under discussion. What we have done is, well, through the tool, you can export the information, so you can use it for analysis using other tools. We have made also our platform mobile friendly, so you can use your telephone or tablet or other type of device to interact with it. But yeah, the API, that's something that we have been discussing.
Thank you, Orlando. Another question before we give the floor to Fede Leon, that has the hand asking for an intervention. Here we have a question: is there traceability of the most significant criteria reliable to be able to audit our suppliers in the supply chain, and thus be able to contribute to the management and minimization of them?
That's a great question. I don't have, I should have a better answer, as they say, for a good question, a better answer. But you can, if you have a supplier, depending on your on where you are in the supply chain, a facility that reports to the PRTR, let's say a food company that may burn coal to produce electricity, okay? So it reports emissions of heavy metals because of the combustion process, but that information, that those heavy metals are not into the food they process and produce. So those same pollutants that you see reported do not necessarily come out in the final product. So in some cases, you can see, yeah, that with this information, depending on what the facility manufactures, you can find out where those releases may end up, you know, but not necessarily on the final product. Or you know, if you see some waste that may be related to their production, yeah, you can infer that, yeah, some of that, those pollutants may end up in the final product, but you will have to get deeper into it. I know some people who have are in the chemical sector, and they looked at our data, and they said it's great because I can look at who's emitting what. I know for a fact what they do, and I can offer this company a less toxic alternative. So, so it helps out in looking at the supply chain issues and transparency, but it's not the only one. And I should then plug in our, we have another project which is going on right now. It's called Improving the Supply Chain Transparency for Chemicals in Products in North America. And next week, actually, we'll be launching a survey to get people's views about supply chain transparency and the best ways and practices of getting chemical composition information from products in the supply chain. So if you're interested in this topic, please send us a note, and we will share the survey with you. And that goes to everybody here.
Thank you very much, Orlando. I also have here just a question that is important regarding this matter is how frequent does the CEC update the taking stock database for current and past data, particularly when one program does update to the data they post on their program?
Yeah, we try to do it right after the 3 programs update the information. Usually, as an example, let's say Mexico publishes their data towards the end of the year. And as you know, there is always a lag. Let's say data for 2022 is collected in 2023. Then it goes through the quality assurance process and all that at the program level, and then it is published. After that's published, then we bring the data and integrate it and we wait until the 3 programs have completed their processes. And then once we integrate it, we also exchange the information with them. If we see any discrepancies in the data that may have been overlooked, then we ensure that we share that information. Also, yeah, we share the information, and then refresh our database for all the years. In some of the programs, facilities can apart from the current reporting year, they may make changes to what they reported previously. And then we also take that information and change it on our site as well. Not only the current reported year, but any changes that have been made in previous years. And our data starts basically in 2006.
Thank you, Orlando. We do have a couple of more questions in the chat, but first we would like to give the opportunity to Fede Leon to unmute and to share the question.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. You did answer my initial question that you just responded to, Orlando, so thank you for that. My question is just to I give you some support in terms of adding the new features in. I think they look pretty cool and will be useful as issues around, especially around the cross-border transfer data, because that's hard to find when you're looking for that information in each of the programs. I guess what I'm keenly interested in is trying to connect the data you present, particularly for that section, as it pertains to any relevant regulations that apply to a specific chemical covered under that reporting. Might be difficult, but it's something that is top of mind for me as we figure out whether there are pollutants that need to be at least tracked and transparent when they move across the borders. So any comments around that is helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Faye. And actually, that's one of our goals in this project or this activity that we are undertaking under the auspices of the OECD PRTR working group, along with our North American partners from the TRI, the MPRI, and the RETSE. You have pollutants which are transferred from one country to the other. But that transfer of, let's say, a substance that is transferred, let's say, from the US to Canada may not be reportable under their PRTR. To give an example, barium from the US to Canada, okay, is not reportable. So what happened to the barium? And we know in these exercises that we have done through the years, the MPRI has identified facilities that should be reporting. And they have, we have worked together providing this information on cross-border transfers and to identify facilities that should be reporting based on the amounts that are reported to have entered the country through this reported PRTR account. So yeah, there are many uses, and so in terms of coverage, yes, we have to look also at what is coming in that is not being covered by our current systems.
Thank you very much, Orlando. And thank you very much, for the question. We do have also Gerardo Mejia who wants to add something. Gerardo, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks a lot. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and see that this information has grown. And you have, I think, an excellent tool because not many people is paying attention to the PRTR inventories. And my question is there any initiative to use this data to perform cancer or non-cancer risk assessment in Mexico due to exposure to these substances? Because I remember about 10, 12 years ago, we have a workshop here in Monterrey, and I saw some studies from Canada, United States with hotspots, and they show, well, these are high probability of perhaps cancer or some malformation, but I haven't seen that for Mexico recently. So it's about the use of the information for decision-making on risk management, or that's has some of this been done, or perhaps in the near future. And another thing that perhaps you can include like a short video or description of how to make the consults that you have just shown, Orlando. That would be, I think, great for the people because it's a very excellent database for studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerardo. And regarding your question or comment, I personally do not know about any efforts in Mexico. Perhaps some of the colleagues here today can provide information. I know that Dr. Álvaro Osornio from University of Alberta, he's a Mexican national. Also, he did some work in Canada on that. I don't know if he was also doing some work in Mexico. I know that Dr. Fernando Díaz Barriga had joined us before. I don't know if he's aware of studies of that type in Mexico, and I will ask anyone to here today if they know to please tell us about it. Does anyone know? No. Okay, we'll find out.
Yeah. Perhaps we
And
can
also,
make a recommendation if this is an important issue. I think to take actions if necessary to reduce risk and cancer risk, for example, due to exposure of these pollutants. I think in the United States there is like some level that if you are above that level of risk, actions need to be taken to reduce the release of pollutants. And I think that would be the use of this information at the end.
Well, that could
That's
be a
yes.
topic for another one of these events as well.
Another workshop.
Yeah, we'll take that into account. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gerardo.
Thank you very much. We do have as well here Sheila Cole. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you so much for the excellent presentations. Sort of picking up from what the last speaker was talking about, I too wonder about practical application, especially related to regulation. As an example, I would like to use selenium that goes into water bodies in, I'll use the Elk River Valley in Alberta as an example, because selenium for a little while is non-toxic and non-problematic. But then all of a sudden in a flash, it becomes toxic. Once it reaches a certain level, it becomes toxic. And there's so much coal mining in the Elk River Valley in Alberta that it is dramatically affecting water bodies, not only in Canada, but also in the US. And the US has made a lot of complaint about it. I'm just wondering how the PRTR data and your experience with it, those of you who are working with it at the CEC all the time, do you get people coming from the environment departments and the fisheries departments, for instance, from, in this case, Canada and the US, wanting to be advised more about the data and use that to try to do something to address the pollutant? And I'll just say that in the case of selenium, regardless of the degree to which people on both sides of the border are concerned about it, there is still expansion of existing mines in the Elk River Valley. So just wanting you to comment on, practical ways that you might be called on yourselves to advise people about the data.
Okay, thank you, Sheila, for your questions and comments. I would say that's the nature of this initiative. We're not only putting data together, but we're working with the PRTR programs to improve the quality of the information and help out in their work. To give you a couple examples, when, let's say, a few years ago, the TRA system had a stay on hydrogen sulfide. it was not being reported under the TRI. And then by them looking at the data from Canada, for example, and Mexico, and having our discussions, national discussions, they were able to see the types of industries, the level of hydrogen sulfide that was being released and reported. And then based on that, they made also recommendations. And finally, together with other actions that were going on at the national level, hydrogen sulfide was restated. We just played a little part in the whole process because there were other interest groups that were pushing for that as well. But we helped in providing the data and comparing. And I think that's this collaboration amongst the three countries is key to that. You mentioned selenium. My understanding is, and perhaps one of our colleagues from NPRI can expand on that. The threshold for selenium in Canada was lowered a couple of years ago at the request of the health department. So, and I don't know exactly what went into it, but I know that for a fact. So the programs are also working and looking at health and looking at other concerns so that the thresholds or pollutants can reported can be adjusted accordingly. So I don't know if any of our colleagues from Canada would like to add.
Sure, Orlando. I can speak to that a little bit.
Thank you.
I think one of the great benefits of CEC for us in Canada when we're considering changes to our reporting requirements, we'll go to the taking stock online and look at what's reported in the US and Mexico and by what sectors to help inform our decisions. An example right now is that PFAS is reported under the toxics release inventory, and we're considering adding reporting requirements for PFAS to the MPRI. So we'll be looking very closely at the US reporting to kind of guide us in our thinking about how we might add that to MPRI. As for the change to the selenium threshold, one of the main drivers for that was Environment Canada's Mining and Processing Division. So they're aware of the selenium issues associated with mining and processing. I don't know if that helps address your question, Sheila.
It's interesting to hear the discussion. Yes, I know it's involves a lot more than we can get into right now, but just to have a bit of a discussion on how this works is helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We do have other questions here in the chat. We have here, Orlando, if any ideas on how to track the emissions that are generated by the recycling of plastics sent from the United States to Mexico?
The emissions from the recycling of plastics. Whether those are, if I may ask for clarification, because plastics, recycling of plastics is not under, currently, it's not under the PRTR. Emissions are really reported if, let's say, some of the plastic is incinerated, then the resulting emissions are reportable. Depending on the process is done, whether it results also in some type of release of a substance, a specific PRTR substance, to the environment, then it's reportable. Otherwise, it is not. But am I Is that the gist of the question? Am I answering correctly, or would you like to expand on that?
Thank you, Orlando. We don't now have the name of the person that posed this question, but in case that the person wants to open the mic and clarify something about this or complement the question, please go ahead.
Thank you. I am Marisa Jacot from Mexico.
Okay. Thank you, Marisa. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I know that plastics is not under the red in Mexico, but we are very concerned. And I also want to ask to Sandra Gaona, because we have the biggest problem of all the plastic that is coming to Mexico to be recycling, but they are not recycling, most of them. They are going to incineration, they are going to cement kilns. So particularly, we don't know how to track this. But we want to know from you if you have any ideas how to do this, or it's a system that we have to look with Sandra, with the EPA, with Mexico or something like that. But we are concerned about this. I don't know how to figure how to track this, but we have emissions for that plastic or that lead that is coming to recycling in Mexico. And now we have the biggest problem that you are going to send from US to Mexico all the lead pipes that I think US is trying to improve the water system. But just ideas or how to track this or something like that. Thank you, Daniel and Orlando, and congratulations for this. We are very happy to hear you.
Thank you, Marisa, for the clarification. And I'll make a comment, and then I will ask Sandra if she's still on to respond. If any type of fuel or that is burned at a cement kiln that results in an emission will have to be reported. Whether or not, well, we know exactly what proportion of that pollutant came out of the plastics or other type of fuel, because you could have coal, you could have tires or other types of refuse derived fuel, and each of those will have a different emissions profile, or toxic profile. So I don't know if well, that level of detail is usually not reportable, but perhaps through other inventories or through other programs, that information may be available. But I don't know if Sandra would like to add.
Sure, certainly, Orlando. I can try to add a little bit more perspective. I think, Marissa, this is a great question and something that as environmental authorities, we're all struggling to try to understand what just the complexities surrounding plastics, of course, our global transport of waste and trying to make the most of that in terms of minimization or extending its useful life. As well as trying to, of course, minimize the impacts on our environment, public health, so on. So earlier we heard questions also surrounding value chain and how we try to quantify that or try to bring some insight from our PRTR data. So I think this is one of those questions that also kind of builds upon that type of thinking of our issues and what piece PRTR can play in terms of trying to inform our understanding of our have exchange of material here. It's a difficult question. I guess that, like, as Orlando was trying to originally respond to, there are some limitations to PRTR in that we are only collecting the information on quantities being emitted or transported, and they're specific to those toxic chemicals. This question of plastics being sent, I think it tends to be not a direct transfer from our facilities, from those reporting to TRI, but more so maybe there is a waste question from other activity in the US from collection and that's going. So that's a certain, I guess, disconnect I'd offer. And so in tracking reporting in Mexico, I think in terms of our universe that we're able to have comparable data on, it is limited then to a threshold exceedances for those facilities, and then whether or not they have the chemicals, you know, within those materials that are being incinerated. And if that's also, depending if that's the type of recycling facility that you're considering. So of course there's variation there as well. I guess I'll offer up that maybe this is also another one of those topics that's very good for a future discussion as we continue to think about value chain and products and connections. But yes, I guess I don't have a better answer, Marissa, in terms of how to best track, you know, the emissions from plastics recycling.
Gracias, Andrea. Gracias, Orlando.
De nada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Everyone, for those great questions. This discussion has been very rich. We'll have a couple of more questions, but we will try to send you the proper answer through email. To be mindful of our time, just to I would like just to give the floor to Daniel Ballet and maybe to close this discussion with some of the reflections that we could have about this relevant discussion regarding this matter.
Sure, thank you very much, Natalia. I'll maybe leave the floor to Orlando, but just want to say thank you to everybody again for participating in this event. We hope that, well, we would like to hear from you. We've, as we mentioned, we've now got a new sort of feedback mechanism. It's if you want to send us your questions, your ideas, we'd like to hear about how you use PRTR data, what your needs are. We really do want to hear about how you're using the data, and you can send us your thoughts via the naprtr@cec.org. That's a sort of a new email address that you can contact us directly. Anytime you want to send us your feedback, you can click on that feedback mechanism in the Taking Stock Online homepage. So really, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Natalia, for your great work, as well as to the rest of the team. Thank you very much to our interpreters for your great work. And so I'll leave the floor to Orlando.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. And also, I echo your words about thanking everybody in our team. And well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It has been a great discussion. We have now also some food for thought for future topics to discuss. Many of you have participated in the past in our public events, and we know that travel is challenging, costs are high, so we're trying to start this series of conversations online in addition to any public event that we may have. and we would like to, again, hear from you about suggestions for the future. Thanking you for your continued support through all these years. And as we can see from the discussion here, it is, we still have a ways to go. This is a work in progress. And those of you who have joined us for the first time, welcome. And we'll continue working together on this. A few things. We have a short survey to know about what you thought about this format and about the event. So we can have also some additional input so we can improve this type of event and make sure that we get into these conversations that are of interest to everybody. Again, if you did not have also the chance to provide us your feedback during the pre-event survey, you can do it now. And as Daniel mentioned, you can also send us a note. And just a few things that come to mind right away is, the topic of the use of the data for different applications. One that was given was the use of health and cancer risk. The issue of the pollutant profile of toxics recycling, specifically when it is incinerated, whether those are reflected in the PRTR data that we get. So there's plenty of information that or topics that we still need to discuss. Well, with that, then thank you everybody for joining, and thank you not only for joining, but for enriching this discussion, making this a worthwhile event. And we will be in touch. We will answer any questions that were left via email, and then we will share any other information with all the participants. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Orlando. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Nice to see you all.
See you, Daniel.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.